Sophie had always been told never to wander the street after midnight, but she didn't believe in the old stories. That night, the air was unusually cold as she walked down a narrow, cobblestone street, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting only the faintest glow. The street seemed to stretch endlessly, unfamiliar despite Sophie knowing the town like the back of her hand. As she walked further, a thick fog began to rise, obscuring her view. She turned around, hoping to retrace her steps, but the path behind her had vanished, replaced by unfamiliar alleyways that twisted into the darkness. Her heart raced as she hurried forward, her breath visible in the chilling air. She passed a series of decrepit houses with windows boarded up, their frames creaking as if they were whispering to her. A faint sound came from the distance, a slow scraping noise that echoed through the fog. Sophie's pulse quickened as the noise grew louder, and she realized it was coming closer. She broke into a run, her shoes slipping on the wet stones beneath her. Every turn led her to the same street, lined with more abandoned houses, each one more dilapidated than the last. Then she saw her an old woman standing in the distance. The woman's hunched figure was draped in tattered clothing, her face obscured by a dark hood. Sophie's instincts screamed to turn back, but something compelled her to approach. As she neared, the woman's head jerked up, revealing eyes that glowed faintly in the gloom. Her voice, a raspy whisper, cut through the silence. "You shouldn't have come here." Before Sophie could react, the woman vanished into the fog, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of dread. Sophie looked around in desperation, but the street was now alive with faint shadows, moving just out of sight. Her legs felt heavy as if something unseen was pulling her down. Suddenly, the scraping noise returned, louder than before. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure crawling towards her, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles, dragging itself across the cobblestones. Its face was contorted, frozen in a horrific scream. Eyes locked onto Sophie. Terror flooded her veins. She ran, but the fog seemed to thicken, suffocating her every step. The figure's raspy breaths echoed behind her, growing closer with every moment. She turned one last corner, but the street came to an abrupt and a dead end, towering walls on all sides. She was trapped. The scraping noise stopped. Slowly, Sophie turned around to face the figure. It stood now, towering over her, its mouth stretched wide in an impossible grin, eyes hollow and empty. Sophie's scream died in her throat as the figure lunged forward, and the street was silent once more, consumed by the ever-present fog. No one ever found Sophie, but the old stories warned others never to walk those streets alone after dark.